First, there is no question that one of the greatest athletes ever to come out of Maine is Joan Benoit Samuelson. After taking up running in her hometown of Cape Elizabeth, she went on to win in 1979 the Boston Marathon and in 1984 the gold medal in the first ever women's Olympic marathon. Joan Benoit Samuelson's story is told in a new documentary produced by the Maine Historical Society, which has named her its 2024 Maine History Maker. You might be surprised to learn that the Maine Historical Society produces documentaries, but as Steve Bromwich, its executive director and the director of the film, told us, it's actually been doing this for a while.
Well, we've been doing this Maine History Maker Award for the last number of years, so we've been creating documentaries for the last 4 or 5 years related to it. So I've cut my teeth doing that, and our team has done that for the last couple of years.
I like the way you set the scene at the beginning of this film about Joni, where you've got these great aerial shots that show Cape Elizabeth. You go right to her roots, where it all began.
Well, I think one of the things that strikes me about Joni is I don't know another human being who it feels like just grew up out of the firmament of Maine and the granite and the woods. So we were so happy to be able to find and use that footage of her running in the woods.
Few people seem to have sprung so directly from Maine's forests, mountains, waters, and rocky coast as Joan Benoit Samuelson. Like a comet from Maine, she burst onto the running scene in 1979 and became an Olympic champion and international icon in 1984.
She tells an interesting story, or I forget if she tells it or you tell it, but there's an interesting anecdote in the film about how when she was young, running on the roads of Cape Elizabeth, it was so uncommon for women to run that she would sometimes stop to pretend she was picking flowers because she didn't want people to think that she was some crazy person out there running.
Yeah, well, it's amazing how long back her groundbreaking running was. You know, it wasn't just when she hit the Olympics or the Boston Marathon, but really she started high school right around Title IX, and so at that point women weren't allowed to run more than a mile. You know, the track programs were there, so she just found she had this passion for it. She went out and did it, and she really established it at the high school, and then from there.
She really broke out, of course, as an elite athlete at the Boston Marathon, 1979. What was she wearing on that day in the race?
Very famously, she was wearing the Bowdoin singlet and a Boston Red Sox hat. You know, so how more New England could you get than that? And I think that's part of what just helped her capture everybody in everybody's heart. You know, she was such a hometown kid.
And there's a remarkable story that I had not heard before about what her reaction was after she won the Boston Marathon and the fame that came with it. Let's take a look at that.
Immediately, she was recognized as an elite athlete and deluged with attention. She was invited to the White House with men's champion and friend Bill Rogers.
And then I remember it just all being too much. I just didn't want to be in the limelight. I didn't want to be a public figure. I didn't want any of that. And I said, I'm never going to run another marathon again.
The idea that she might never run another marathon again just seems outlandish.
Yeah, well, I think one of the interesting things about her is she's so self-motivated, and it's all about her passion to run a faster race and to excel. So for her, it's not about beating other people, but it's just her passion to do it. And that was so firmly grounded in her love of running and in her love of Maine, really.
To make a documentary like this work, you got to get photos and you got to get film and video clips. How hard was it to get what you wanted?
Yeah, well, in this case, it was interesting. There were a lot of photos, but it was complicated because her life has been so public. So a lot of that stuff is official stock photography done by magazines and newspapers, so you have to be really careful with permissions. So we had a lot of material. What was so rich, I think, was the interviews with her friends and her family and her colleagues. You know, we really tried to kind of tell her story through the things that were important to her, and the people in her life were just so wonderful, and they told great tales.
I think perhaps my favorite clip comes from the 1984 Summer Olympics in Los Angeles. In her own words, she talks about what it was like when she was out on the course.
Ironically, I felt the most at home when I was on the LA freeway because there wasn't any vehicular traffic on the freeway at that point. So I was there all alone thinking I was on a backcountry road in Maine. So who's going to want to come out and watch a bunch of women run 26.2 miles and finish in a Coliseum?
Obviously, she's one of the really impressive Mainers of the last century. And this is what you want to do is, as you put it, preserve and share the story of Maine.
That's right, and I think one of our focuses is that everybody's story matters, and everybody's story contributes to what makes Maine Maine. And you can't understand Maine without somebody from Millinocket working in a paper mill, or a summer person, or a woods person. But I think Joni is just such a quintessential Mainer. That's what our Maine History Maker Award really tries to recognize: people who are committed to the community, represent values that we think are really important, and a big part of that is humility and just being down to earth. I think more than anything, Joni just is happy to be a Mainer, part of the community and a neighbor, as opposed to somebody special on a pedestal.
The name of the Maine Historical Society's documentary is Joan Benoit Samuelson, A Maine Story. You can find out more about the film and the Historical Society by going to the 207 section of our News Center Maine app or website.